So I'm really, 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 really happy to be with you, Nadia, today because, well, for various reasons. One of which you were the senior trainer, my first senior trainer in my
Yay.
first seminar, God knows when, like almost more than 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
it's just with a sort of very, very grateful heart that I begin this talk with you today. And just knowing you and appreciating your presence and appreciating who you are and your not only your your scientific background but your love for this work and I just wanted to start with that. How did you get involved in this? What was the starting point?
Well, you're making me blush here, Paul.
Good. You deserve it.
Thank you so much. And it's been a great pleasure meeting you, Paul. I mean, it's totally likewise, like totally reciprocal. And it's been a joy following your journey as well. And it was in Switzerland where we started, isn't
That's
it?
right.
Yeah, it
That's
was in
right.
Switzerland where we
Young
started.
Tower. Yeah.
Yeah, so how did I start? Basically, that's your question, right?
Yeah.
Well, this happened quite some time ago, actually, believe it or not. So the year of 2005, so this is 20 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, let me just say before, because it's a bit of a sad story, but let me just say that as far as I'm now understanding, crisis is probably one of the biggest um, motivators, let's say, for change. And so I am actually not so scared of crisis or chaos anymore. But this story starts with a crisis. I was doing really well, totally self-sufficient, working my way as a doctor in pharmaceutical medicine. I had the car, the job, the car, the house, the guy, you get the picture. It was fine, it was good. And suddenly I get this phone call on the 5th of January, and my mother died very suddenly. We didn't know what had happened. She had just fallen over, and 2 hours later, she had passed away. And obviously that was very shocking to me. My mom was my good friend, and obviously we had to deal with all the stuff that came with that. And the thing that really shocked me most there is that it was as if the rug was pulled from
Mhm.
underneath my feet. Like my life was upside down and inside out, and I just basically lost my footing. And I was shocked about that because I had everything covered. My mother was a healer and a reader and a homeopath at that time, so that there was more than just a human body I already knew. And it was really as if I got a very big shove that it was my turn now to start developing. And I still remember 3 months later, I called into the office. I had already been working, 2 weeks later, I was back at the job and fully functional, but there was this thing, this emotional blockage that was stuck here, and I just kept crying and being angry, and it didn't seem to move. And I don't know, I called in sick one day, said it's just too much, and my boss, bless his heart, said, "Oh, this is taking a bit long now." Like, this isn't taking long at all. My mother just died. What do you mean? Yeah, it was really. Yeah, anyway. Bless his heart, because he actually made me move. He made me look for things so to actually resolve this. And so I first went to the psychologist, and psychologist told me after 8 times, I think you're done. And I thought, okay, so when are we actually going to start talking about the emotions? Like, we hadn't done that at all yet.
Mm.
And he said, you'll be fine. It's like, I never doubted I wouldn't be fine, but when are we actually going to deal with this, what is here? And then I did some meditation, and even though that was lovely, it didn't do anything with this here. And then I I worked in a pharmaceutical company, and they have these days out, and they invite people to come and give workshops. And we actually had a mid-weight boxing champion come to our workshop to give us a boxing workshop. And I thought, I'll go because that was enough. There was enough to be boxed, so I did that. And then at the end, he started talking about the breath and how you could actually resolve your emotional blockages through the breath. And I thought, that's interesting. And he said, if you want to know more, come to me, talk to me. So I spoke with him. He's actually a really nice guy. And he told me about transformational breath and how you could do a seminar and how he refers all his pupils that are in training to go there to actually work with their breath because it creates focus in the ring. And he said, oh, yeah, he listened to me. He said, well, if you have the money and if you have the time, please just do the seminar, which is the week-long breathing thing. So I still remember looking it up on the website, not actually reading much of it, and just going, okay, breathing. I mean, how hard can it be? Well,
Little did you know.
exactly. Honestly, Judith still came to the Netherlands in those days. I was lucky enough to actually do all my training with Judith, even the seminar. And there she was talking about how, she had done miracles with her cancer, with the breath. And I was there sitting there as a doctor and going, okay, well, that's a tall story, but I'm not the kind of doctor that just goes, that can't be. It's like, okay, if that's true, how? Like, how does that work? Anyway, I did my seminar. It was not easy, but it gave me a new life. I think it's safe to say, just to say that it just gave me a totally new life. So that was the start of the
That
journey
was
with the
the
breath.
start, the
Yeah.
beginning. And then obviously you continued, you did the 4A and the 4B, I imagine, became a facilitator.
Yeah.
And now today you're a senior trainer and you run seminars and you run 4As and 4Bs,
Yeah.
not only in the Netherlands where you live, but also in England, I believe, and in other countries. So
Switzerland, France, Portugal.
Switzerland, France, so
Went
yeah,
to Kuwait once, which was amazing. Yeah.
Kuwait, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so it just to sort of have your input on what it's like to work in different countries and what it's like, dealing with different people, I suppose, because your specific circumstances, how you got into the breath was through, as you mentioned, crisis, and maybe for a lot of people, there's a similar story. There's a crisis situation, or at least something that comes up, that emerges. But what would you like to highlight just from your experience, because you've been at it for some time now, so, and in different circumstances, different countries. So what would be what would be the things that you would like to highlight in the participants that you see?
In terms of the experiences I've had with them, is that what you're
Yeah,
asking for?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, people ask me, what kind of people do you see? I focus on people with cancer. I've been doing that now for, let's see, 8 years now. A good 8 years now. Having said that, I mean, I see a mix of people, and as you just said, there's always something going on. There's always some sort of a quote unquote crisis going on. The thing I find most important actually is the realization that I've had over the years that I've been working with people like this is that if we do not address the emotional and the mental component of that, what is going on, and specifically if we're talking about illness and chronic illness, we're missing the ball, basically. We're really missing a really key point in health. And I believe the breath, or this particular type of breath, is particularly strong in addressing not just the physical, which is something we tend to forget. It actually has very amazing physical benefits, but it also addresses the mental and emotional levels. And when you address those and create healing in those, that's where health actually comes back into play, which is something that unfortunately I realized regular medicine does not have enough of attention for.
Yeah, I mean, this really opens up for me a huge theme in the way we approach health and the way we approach medicine. So I just like to clarify that you obviously, when you run seminars, when you run 4As and 4Bs, there's all sorts of different people that turn up, not just people who have
Mm,
cancer
Absolutely.
or have medical issues. But you've become a specialist, and I've heard such amazing feedback from people who staff with us in France about what they learned from you during your masterclass in cancer. So I would highly recommend this to
Come,
all.
come, come.
Come to Nedja and learn about cancer, because it is obviously a theme. I mean, we on average have maybe 2 or 3 people per seminar, I would say, who have had or maybe are in contact with somebody who has a cancer or whatever. So cancer's, you know, sometimes unfortunately quite close to a lot of people's experience. So just to sort of dive a bit deeper into this theme of modern medicine does not treat mental and emotional component of illness, which is such an important factor. Um, how do you deal with that? How do you convince the medical establishment that it's necessary, number one, or do you even bother? Do you just
I
get on with
don't.
it? And how does it work? So just give us a couple
Yeah.
of.
No, I just let the results do the talking. Basically, trying to convince, in any case, the Dutch medical establishment is not something that I'm going to work on by myself. I've already learned
Just
that a
forget
long
about
time
it.
ago. It's just not going to be the most effective use of my energy, I think. I like to let the effects do the talking. If I may, I'll just highlight that with one of my cases. She was actually one of my first, I even may even be have been the first cancer patient that I had in my practice. When I started advertising breathwork for people with cancer, when I actually felt comfortable enough to be able to say that, and it gives you benefits. Now, just to be clear about one thing, I think is really important. I will never claim that we can heal cancer with breathwork.
Of course, yeah.
Could never promise that. I do find, however, that together with regular medicine, it gives people an enormous boost in health. And so this lady came in and she was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term, but it just means that you have bits of cancer in your lymphatic system, and it's treatable, but it's not a very good diagnosis. Let's put it that way. It's somewhere midway between terrible and okay. And she started breathing with me, and I basically, people need to breathe with me at least 10 times if they have cancer. I won't let them off the hook. They can't do less than that.
Good
Because I
girl,
know it
good
has to be
girl.
effective, right? It
Pin them
has to.
down, pin them down.
Well,
Yeah.
it's just that I work on a premise that if I offer something, it has to be effective. And for it to be effective, people actually have to commit to it. So that's how I work. Otherwise, it's a waste of their precious time and effort, because some people do not have very long to live, and they probably have better things to do with their time than if it's not going to work. Yeah. So that's basically how I work with them. And we work quite efficiently. We work every week. And this lady was on chemotherapy, and she wasn't liking the idea of having chemotherapy. But in general, it's 8 courses of chemotherapy, and she was going through that, and people generally tend to get quite sick with it. They lose their hair, they get really, really tired, which is one of the most important complaints that we see with chemo and even after. This lady was just, she was so energized with the breathing. It was just incredible that the nurses at the hospital started asking her, like, what are you doing? Is you like, people
What
were
drug are you
just,
taking?
well, people would be schlepping themselves, and no disrespect intended, but people would literally be schlepping themselves into the next course. And she would breathe in and she would make jokes, and she would be the one with the energy and the laughter. And the nurses were going, what are you doing that everybody else isn't doing? So she had everybody write down transformational breath, obviously. She had a scan after 4 courses, and the tumor had done so well that something quite incredible happened. The oncologist decided to give her 2 courses less of the chemotherapy, which is something that in the Netherlands generally doesn't happen.
That's amazing.
I know.
So it's something you can't really claim
No,
because you don't know whether it's repeatable or not. So from a
no.
scientific perspective, it's not really what it won't change the diagnosis.
Well, if you would
But
want to research it, you would have to do it with more patients like that. But I
so,
think
so,
in
so,
this
so
this
yeah.
case is just it just shows you the power of the potential of what is possible when people start working with themselves and the breath.
So just to relate back to what we were talking about before we actually pushed the record button, with case studies and what have you, can you give us a sort of scientific perspective on what can be claimed and what can't be claimed, or what would be a scientific approach to breath work, or what would be a scientific understanding of what's going on with transformational breath?
Oh gosh.
Big question.
You just opened a really, really big subject here.
Pandora's box, they call it.
Don't talk to a scientist about science.
They go, what?
Well, the thing people need to understand, I think, is really if you talk about science, there's different ways of dealing with it, and in general, it has to be reproducible, right? That's what we find
That's
very,
the
very
key thing,
important.
yeah.
And what we generally tend to do is to work under controlled circumstances. So that's basically, as you would say, if we were to research this case, we would need to know what she was having, where she was having it, and then you would actually find 10 or 20, or it depends on what kind of result you're looking for. You would calculate that, and then you would get all these people to do the same thing, and then you would actually decide whether it was effective or not, or whether it's reproducible in other people as well or not. So one
So this would
case
be a sort of
basically.
mechanistic approach to science.
Well, that's
Would you
basically
agree with
it.
that?
If you would talk to scientists, that's what they have in their mind when you
That's what they
talk
have in
about
mind,
science.
but it's a
There's
mechanistic.
another,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
true, true. So, and then there's another way of looking at it, which I think could be actually just as interesting. And we do that a lot, and it happens a lot in psychology as well, is what we call real life circumstances. So when you start looking into case studies, people going through certain things like this lady, and you go, hey, this is interesting. And then you actually start looking through maybe interviewing all the other facilitators or trainers, asking them, have you actually had similar results, or tell me your results, and let's just have a look if there are certain groups that seem to be responding well to breathwork or that seem to be doing better than others. That's another way of actually looking at science that is perhaps maybe even more interesting, I think,
Totally, totally.
because this, like the controlled circumstances, just only is valid within those circumstances, but that's not real life. Real life basically is what we deal with each and every day, the food we eat, the emotions that we go through, and it's all different. We're all different. So if you could actually show within that there are a lot of people that are having benefit or reporting benefit, that's actually that evidence would actually be considered stronger, if you like. Well, I think it's stronger than that what you've actually looked at in controlled circumstances.
Especially as with transformational breath, I mean, we have references, let's put it that way, in 50 different countries. So there's
Yeah.
an extraordinary diversity of evidence, or possible evidence, put it that way, or case studies that
Yeah, and the more case
could be
studies you have,
referred
the
to.
stronger your evidence will be, and the more mixed the groups are, exactly as you say. So it's clearly not dependent on culture, it's not dependent on religion, it's not dependent on race. It basically works for everyone, is what we're starting to conclude here, which is quite interesting, I think, because basically everybody
I
can
think so
breathe,
too.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just the other way to approach it. You would just need to have more numbers.
More
Yeah, you would
numbers,
have more numbers.
and I think that's probably, and also the willingness to dig deep enough into the experiential evidence of 50 different countries or whatever. So it's
Yeah.
probably a considerable amount of work. But just to look at your experience with
Mm.
cancer patients, and what you've seen over the years, what do you see happening? Do you see any obviously you see good results, I hope, with your cancer patients. But what's the sort of ongoing? I mean, is there a change, do you think, in established science in terms of what they see happening, or is it inconsequential as far as most people are concerned?
I love your questions. They make me think.
They're a bit chaotic. I was thinking to myself, was I clear about what I was to say there? I wasn't quite
Well,
sure. But anyway, yeah.
you actually mixed two things there that make me wonder because I wouldn't call that then scientific if you're looking all across the board. But I think honestly, the experiential evidence is much more interesting here. Well, I can in any case say everybody. What I see most across the board is people being more vital, more open to life, have much more energy, which is in itself already super important. Um,
But
when,
I mean, one of the things that I've seen in, and this is, not particularly addressed to people with any form of, illness or cancer or whatever, but what I've seen is that with transformational breath, they tend, or they can use the breath to clarify and to get more in connection with themselves, so that whatever's happened to them, whether it's an illness or whether it's maybe a breakup, or maybe it's a loss in their family, whatever's happened to them
yeah,
becomes in some way more understandable, more integrated, more in line with what they want to achieve in the future.
well,
Does that
it's more
resonate?
that, well, I love how Michael Brown actually states it. And he says, you become the load comes away from that experience, so there's an emotional charge that is connected to the experiences that we've had. I mean, I'm just the same as everybody else. I'm not immune to this, being a teacher, obviously. um, the experience I have is that basically that charge gets plucked off the memory. The memory still stays, it's still there, it's okay, but it is not so charged anymore, which
Mm,
means that you become more free. And to
mm,
me, freedom is what it's all about, freedom to choose. Um, and that with that, you will come into connection with your true self, into connection with your true essence more and more, because that the muck basically gets cleared. The muck gets cleared as you carry on, and the clarity in that is just incredible. And the way I tend to explain it to people is that you will be able, or people are much more able to say yes or no from a space of actually knowing and understanding what they need and do not need. It becomes like really truthful what people are saying about themselves towards others. So taking your own life in your own hands is, I think, a phrase that really works very well for this. That you start deciding from not from a space of fear, you start deciding not from a space of pleasing, and which is actually based on fear again, but right. Um, but just coming from that true core, that true essence that you are, really understanding who we truly are, away from the fears or the emotions, the angers, etc., that trigger us continuously. And I think that is where breathwork is just so powerful. I mean, not to say that there aren't any other techniques that could do the same, but I think that the space of time that you can do it within, with connected, conscious connected breathwork is just phenomenal. It's just so
phenomenal.
effective.
Yeah.
I always say to people, I like to be efficient.
Yeah,
It's
I
my
can see that. I can see your 10 sessions with your patients. Because I really respect that, and I think that's something that, that I would totally align, what we do as well with that, is that, it's one of the reasons why we don't do 1 day workshops anymore, is that we want to give value. And we
yeah,
found that a sort of minimum period to give value would be a weekend, two and a half
yeah,
days.
yeah.
And the seminar is even better, 6 days. It's almost like you can be pretty damn sure that that person's going to get something consequential at the end of 6 days. It's
Well,
something.
that's it, isn't it? I mean, if you're going to spend your time and your money on it, it
Yeah,
better well work. And it's not to say that a single session won't work. It always does something
yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. But when working with trauma, or yeah, let's just call it trauma because I think that that's what we're talking about. Um, it needs commitment. It needs a certain commitment. We are always so looking for the quick fix and the magic bullet. And I
Totally,
think
totally.
we're allowed to come back round to the fact that we've actually been living for XYZ amount of years. Certain things have actually settled into the system. You can't pluck it out like a feather. Sometimes it needs a bit of work. It needs a bit of digging. And if people could just be patient with themselves and their bodies, not to say the least, the body needs to shift, needs to find new paths. I mean, this is a Titanic that you're shifting,
Mm.
right? And it needs to go slowly. But if you can actually bring up that patience with yourself, the results are gonna be phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying, and I think it's so clear. I think in most people's minds, if, for instance, they had a cancer or they had a friend who had a cancer, then they would certainly say, yeah, you have to commit, you have to really go for it, or whatever. But actually, it's true of everybody
Yeah,
to a certain extent. It's true that if you want to change anything in your life, which is, I suppose, the reason why people do seminars. They want to change something, they want to transform something, then they have to kind of commit to it. They have to
you
say,
need to do the work.
you have to do the
You need to
work.
do the
And,
work.
and I
Yeah.
think that's one of the
There's no
things
quick
that
fix. At
there's no
least,
quick fix. Yeah,
let's say the sustainable results. There are no quick fixes for that.
yeah,
Let's put it that way.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not for nothing that they say that it takes, what is it, 90 days to actually start new behavior.
Mm,
I mean,
mm.
those are the mechanisms that are actually inside of us. That's just the way it works. So let's work with that. Let's work with that and allow yourself to make those changes in a way that is sustainable.
And the other thought that occurs to me when when talking to you with all your experience with dealing with people with serious illnesses,
Mm,
and or serious, maybe perhaps when you dig a bit deeper, there's some deep trauma going on behind that cancer or whatever, which
usually.
maybe we could talk about.
Yeah.
But what seems to me to be true is that it seems that it's not just a question of whether you're ill or not ill.
No.
It's like it's universal. It's as if we're talking humanity here. It's like everybody seems to have an emotional charge of different degrees of intensity. But and this is so it's like transformational breath is really, it's good for everybody. It's
Well,
not
and,
just
and this
people
is
who
the
have,
and that's the whole problem of it, because if you start telling people it's good for everybody, they don't believe you.
they don't believe you. They don't believe you. That's true. That's true.
And no, I mean, I think it's something very inherent in us as human race that we carry thoughts and ideas about what we've experienced. I have never been an animal, so I can't say what it's like to be one. But my feeling is, or my sense is, that the fact they have slightly less active thinking minds is quite supportive in them actually dealing with whatever happens to them. We drag things along, don't we? I don't know. I'm looking at you. I mean,
No,
I
no,
do.
totally, totally. I get it. I get it. No,
Anyway,
I resonate very much with that. Yeah. I
yeah,
breathe
we
every
we
morning just to clear up the stuff that I accumulate.
exactly, and that's because we think, and as the brain is a super powerful instrument, we can also start using it to help us instead of to actually bring us down. So thought patterns are something that we can change actually relatively easily, and breathwork again is one of the most amazing techniques that actually supports us in that, in a way that you don't actually have to do a lot of work. And now I know I'm kind of backtracking on myself, but seriously, it's super effective. And as I said, okay, I happen to be working with cancer patients, and it attracts more people that have illnesses. But in all fairness, I like to work with the patients and their partners, because their partners are the ones
Wow.
that are not having the support. Like, there's a whole team around the person that's having the cancer. The partner has to fend and deal with what's going on by themselves. I very often, the convincing of them to come is the hardest work I have, is to actually get the partner to come in as well. At the end of the trajectory of at least 10, those are the people that are thanking me the most, because those are the people that have had the most benefit. So
Wow.
talking about universal, yes, and I don't know if there's a person on the planet, apart from the few avatars that we have, that hasn't had adverse experiences in their life that may not have been resolved in the moment. And not to, not to forget about all the collective that we're carrying along with us, experiences that our ancestors have had, or experiences that people have had in our country or in our race. That's charge that we're carrying as well. So let alone forget about your own life, but forget about like eons and eons of charges that we're carrying for actually people that have come before us. And so this is also where I love this work, because it's holy. I call it, it's holy work. We're clearing the collective consciousness as well. So you're not just working for yourself. Basically, that way you're clearing in yourself, you're clearing for everyone.
I'm getting goosebumps hearing you.
Yeah.
This is
So
such an important message for me.
really, I mean,
Yeah.
this is the work. This is the work that we're doing. So basically, we are supporting the enlightenment of the world when we do our work. You see it in our children. Children actually stop carrying the burdens that we have cleared. People actually see how their kids become more free and easy. So parents can breathe on issues that maybe their kids are experiencing. That's how it works. We're all connected. Everything is connected.
We had Michael Brown on a Q&A in our last 4A, and one of the things he said was that only 1% of the human population is doing emotional integration work. So don't expect this to be a lot of people doing it. There will only be a few people doing it. And so that resonated with me in terms of what we talked about earlier in terms of commitment, because, that's the bottom line for me, is that this work needs commitment. Well, that's the way I
Yeah.
I live it, in the sense that every seminar for me is almost an act of faith. I feel I have to be at my best game, and be the best person I can possibly be to do this work. And it's an effort. It's a real,
Well,
you
it
know,
takes upkeep, doesn't it? It takes
it
upkeep in
does.
any case. I mean, it's for me too, continuously working on myself.
Mm,
Because the way if we create space within ourselves, we can actually allow others to come into that space and actually create that space for themselves. I used to think I was a healer, so trained as a doctor and then going on to do breath work, and I used to think that was my profession, a healer. And at some point, actually, I think it was last year that I asked myself, like, why am I actually here, and what really makes me tick, and what is important to me in life, and how do I want to spend the rest of my life. It sounds terrible, but it isn't. Um, I realized I'm not a healer. It's not about healing. It's about enlightenment.
mm,
That is what really just, I don't know, makes me so happy if I can see someone come free from that was holding us back. To
mm,
literally, it's again, it's the free to be free to choose what you want to choose from freedom. And it's not about just doing whatever you want. It's not that. It's about being brutally honest to yourself, brutally honest, and totally understanding this is what is good for me. This is what is not good for me. I don't have to get angry about that.
mm,
I can just be clear. Yes, I will do this. No, I will not do that. And it's all good. It's all good. And then that space that opens up. And that's, I think, where we ought to be moving, all of us. I think everybody is going to start doing the work at some point.
mm,
Everybody's going to start doing the work at some point. And maybe we're the forerunners, or maybe we're somewhere in the middle. I don't know on the grand
mm.
scale of things. But that is basically what it is, I think. So I'm with the Enlightenment movement.
Yay!
That's what I say now. It's about
Yeah.
enlightenment. And
I mean,
enlightenment isn't something like high like a pie in the sky yogi on a mat in the Himalayas. To me, enlightenment is just living your life in harmony, peace, and love. I
mm.
think that's achievable.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you could describe it in different ways, couldn't you? I mean, aligning with your higher self, or aligning with
Yeah.
your deeper values, or whatever way that you would like to put it. But it certainly brings in more light. This is why we call it enlightenment, I
Yeah.
assume, is that it
Yeah.
brings more light and joy into your everyday existence. And that hopefully permeates outwards and affects other people and maybe brings some light into the world as well. But just going back to this emotional integration work and this idea that the breath work really helps us get to, or come to terms with this emotional charge, or maybe shed some of it or whatever. But how does that affect the way we look at the future, or how does that affect what we then build in terms of our everyday lives, or projects or whatever? Do you think it has a resonance? Well, I know you do, but I'm just asking you that question. What effect does it have on your future projects or life or ambition?
I honestly, I think it's all about being truthful to yourself and
Mm.
working in harmony. Like what my clients tell me most is that basically they were able to deal with situations without getting into disharmony, without getting into fights, which I think is huge. Like just imagine your office and not having to get angry about that colleague or that boss anymore, but just simply being able and to state what it is that is necessary and just to work with that, basically to work together on things. I don't know. That sounds nice to me. Like it's more harmonious. People do not need to get into fights about things because they don't feel wronged, or like that charge comes away. So you become
Mm.
much more effective in what you do, and you start pursuing a life that you actually want to pursue, something that makes you happy. And I think living our lives, honestly, our only task here is literally to be happy with what we're doing.
Mm.
Like if
Mm.
you're just talking about something as simple as work, if you're working full time, that is 1/3 of your life.
Mm.
Why would you be doing something that actually isn't something that makes you happy? Obviously, money comes into play, and I totally understand that. But if you were to be able to actually create that money in a way that also makes you happy, wouldn't that? I mean, that's a no-brainer to me. So I see people shifting enormously, making choices that normally they would never have dared to take, which actually is leading them into the direction of bliss, of happiness, of joy with the people in their lives that bring them bliss and joy. And does that sound airy fairy? Yes, maybe, but you know what? It's possible. It actually exists. Can we allow ourselves to receive that and to create that for ourselves? And that's what being truthful to yourself means, is just to make the choices that are that work for you. So I stepped away from pharmaceutical, if you want my story, but like I stepped away from pharmaceutical industry, started doing what my heart's desires, which is this breathwork. It's a massive passion for me right now. um I moved myself away from circumstances that don't work so well for me. And I basically, there's this flow that starts happening that makes life really, really easy. Wayne Dyer says, you can't go wrong because you're on rails. And he has this image of a tram, that you're actually standing in a tram and it just goes on rails. And I think I didn't understand it when I read his book, but I thought I liked the image. But honestly, that's how it works. Our higher spirit basically really can lead us to a very joyful life if we let it. And clearing the gunk, clearing the thought processes, the judgments, the pain that are connected to trauma that we've gone through, frees that space to actually start leading that life that our spirit is wanting to lead us on. Again, that's back to freedom, free choices.
And one of the things that I really appreciated in transformational breath, although at the beginning was a bit of a resistance point for me, was this idea of really putting central or giving central place to the spiritual dimension,
Hmm.
um, which I think takes a fair amount of courage in today's world where the spirit, anything to do with divine or God or whatever, is almost automatically excluded from all conversations that are serious. Um, so, what's your um, what's your feeling about putting the spiritual dimension in a central position in breath work or in transformational breath?
Well, if I can be honest, and this is what my experience brought me, the spiritual dimension is what it's actually really about.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
the only thing it's about. People
Totally.
come in with physical complaints and mental emotional and or mental emotional complaints, but it's the physical dimension that it's really, really about. I remember Judith telling us this, obviously, and I kind of was lenient to it. I liked the thought, but I never had experienced it. So I was working together with another colleague, dear colleague of mine in the Netherlands, and she had started 1 year before me with her trainership. And when she hit 8 years, she looked at me and she said to me, "I think I'm only now just starting to understand what this work is really about." And I went, "Ooh, interesting." And we talked about it, and I can't remember exactly what she said anymore. I was thinking, okay, next year is my 8th year. I wonder if I'll hit that point as well, right?
The 8-year point.
Well, I just wonder whether it was something for her or whether we all go through this. Anyway, I came to my 8th year, and I was looking, in a room at a seminar or one of the programs, I can't remember, and I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm only just lifting a smidgen of the veil of understanding what this work is truly about. And I'm thinking, oh, just imagine the experience that Judith has. Like, she knows things about where we can go with this breathwork that I can't even imagine right now, which I know I'm a bit further down the line. It is the spiritual dimension. When we leave it out, it's incomplete. It has to be there. And I'm totally grateful to Judith for putting this in so at the forefront and center. And okay, great, just get triggered, get triggered. It's a wonderful way to actually start working with it if you dare to, which obviously you did. The triggers actually invite us to go there because those are bits that we haven't integrated yet, we haven't worked with yet. So how lovely that people can get triggered with that if they're willing to do the work. And it has to be experienced. That's something I still wanted to say before. Like, we can talk about it, but it has to be experienced. So that's why I always invite people even to come in for one session so they can experience that spiritual level, because it's so uniquely personal. It has nothing to do with religion or what you believe. It just that an experience of the spiritual aspect is something that is going to be different for each and every person coming in. People would just allow themselves to just give themselves an option to start experiencing how big we really are.
Mm. One of the things that comes to mind when listening to you is this, which I think is a difficult theme to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
is whether we are teachers or learners. And I know that in my path as a senior trainer, it becomes it has become more and more a case for me that every seminar that I do, every 4A that I do, every 4B that I do, I'm looking at it and saying, what am I going to learn from this? Not what I'm going to teach, because that's
Yeah.
almost a done deal as far as I'm concerned. It's what am I going to learn? Why am I here? Not why they are here, but why am I here? And what are they going to teach me?
Well, there's no such thing as leading a group and not going into process yourself. It just
Yeah,
doesn't
it's like the
exist.
washing machine is for everybody, right?
Oh yeah. We may just be able to park it a bit better. We can park it and deal with it in moments that, we are not in front stage. That's the one thing I really realized. I remember the Dutch trainer here always would start his seminars saying, "Okay, we're welcome on board. We're on the ship, and I'm at the helm, and we're going to go on a trip." And at some point, I realized, it's okay. It's not like I am leading the group. There is nothing to carry. We are all here in it together. And,
Mm,
and the only thing that we grow in is perhaps the skill to be less whacked out when we get triggered, or to be able to park it a bit better so we can deal
mm.
with it at a moment that is appropriate. That's the only thing. I used to feel like I was holding them, but I am not holding like we're all in it together. The only thing maybe I might bring is my faith or my trust in the fact that I know that this works, and that if someone is feeling quite inundated with what is actually coming up for them, that I can hold that space together with the team. It's the team is instrumental in that too.
Yeah,
We're on it
can we talk
together.
about that, because that's something that
Yeah.
that Katarina and myself are just so it's become so obvious that the team is such an important part. I mean, there's no way that we could do what we do without the team, without people who are committed, without people who are enthusiastic about this work. I mean, I find myself so overwhelmed with gratitude to the
Mm.
extraordinary people that we work with. I mean, it's just incredible the
And
amount
don't
of
you just
people.
love how the team kind of comes into existence depending on who comes in as participants? So
Mm,
it all fits together so perfectly. I every time I'm just in awe of who I get as a team, because I don't get to choose who I get as a team and who comes in as participants. And we all have recognitions, and that's what I love in this work. And maybe that answers a previous question of you as well. Is like the minute we've breathed together, one session, we recognize each other. No matter what your walk of life is, no matter of what you've experienced in life, somehow we're all dealing with the same thing, whatever name or color or shape or form it has. We recognize each other automatically. People sometimes come to me going, "I don't dare to breathe in a group," and I'm hoping that people will trust, because the minute people just breathe together, there is this instant recognition, perhaps of something very like us being humans, that occurs where like the group is instant, and that is just magical. And the team is such an important part of that as well. Yeah.
yeah, because I don't think that because I think that the whole thing kind of rests on a sense of trust, that
Mm.
the people feel safe enough, that there's enough
Yeah.
psychological safety for people
Yeah.
to really allow themselves to connect in a different way with themselves and with other people.
Yeah.
And I think the team plays such an incredible role in that, because
Yeah.
it's good to see the senior trainer aligned with themselves and what have you, and he or she is speaking, and we like that. But if we don't see consistency and we don't see harmony in the multiplicity of a team, then we won't have the same sense of safety.
Well, in all honesty, and it really comes down to such details, even things that we can't even mention or name. But that sense of safety is basically the instrumental to every all this work that we do. I mean, when people come to my practice, or even when I give workshops or groups, I say, listen, the way I see my role here, because we all just have a different role, is if I could, especially in one-on-ones, create the safety that you need to take the steps that you wouldn't be taking by yourself, then my work is done. And I would consider that the greatest compliment that I can get. And I do consider that the greatest compliment that I can get when people come up to me and say, "I feel so safe with you." And it's like, "Oh, bless you."
Mm,
Because then it means that you're allowing yourself to open up, to go to those vulnerable spaces. And this is where the healing lies. This is where the integration happens. And if we as a team can provide that space for you, I mean, that's just phenomenal. That's all we need to do, really.
And,
It's
and,
key.
and do you see this is, a theme that that I think, well, I certainly feel that things are changing, in our environment, the actual times that we're living through, politically, socially, economically. It seems to be that much more intense or that much
Mm.
more polarized or what have you. And
Yeah,
there's two things that for me comes out of that is number one is that what I've noticed that our seminars, they just tend to attract more commitment, more committed people
yeah,
and people who have thought about it more deeply.
yeah,
It's as if the time itself, as if the
yeah.
understanding of our time is delivering people of a higher level without putting too much judgment
The-
on it. But it's just that's what it you know
yeah.
that's what I feel. But I don't know
Well,
whether.
what I noticed is people actually recognizing the value of working
Mm,
with your emotional charge.
mm,
And that has, I mean, when I started this work, when I went, because I had to start working freelance as well, I get back in the pharmaceutical industry, which is interesting enough in itself that I was actually able to do that after I had promised myself I would never have to do that again. I actually came back into it again, believe it or not, in the same job temporarily, and had a totally different experience of it. Like as if that other not so happy experience just had never existed. It
never
was just like,
existed.
is this the same job? Are these the same people? Is this the same company? How can this happen? It's like I actually had fun there, like total fun. But I couldn't talk about breathwork. Like, so the people that hired me knew that I had my own private practice in breathwork, but I couldn't talk about that on the work floor. Now, now, and as we moved on from that, I would say breathwork, and people go, "Oh, okay," and then they basically would carry on. So at some point, I grew and started talking about it, and people, it wouldn't mean anything to them. Now, when I say people, I have my own breathing practice. Oh, really? How interesting! And there's this whole conversation that starts going on. So it's much more. People are much more open to it.
Mm,
I mean, COVID, and we know it has been a crisis and still continues to be in the aftermath, has done one really important and wonderful thing for us, and that is actually people have started understanding how important breathing is
mm,
simply by the nature of the illness. And again, I said, I'm not scared of crisis. So people are now scared of crisis. And all I'm looking at is the potential of that. It's like, this is putting us in a pressure cooker and is actually supporting people in breaking away in ways that they normally would never have done if it was easy. Can't say I agree with this strategy. I don't know why we need to develop this way. I wish it was different.
do we
But
have to suffer so much in
I
order to
know
get to
why.
where we need to
Why?
go? Yeah.
And but crazily enough, it is probably the most effective way because I do see people changing in a big way now, and really understanding that it's more necessary now than ever. And that's basically why I say I think we all need to start doing this at some point. I might not be around to see that, but I think we all need to start doing that at
Yeah, I
some
mean
point.
that's certainly the feeling that I get. There is certainly a bigger understanding of what's at stake, a much bigger appreciation of breath work in general. People, generally speaking, would kind of agree that breath work could be useful in most circumstances.
Yeah,
But I'm also, one of the things that is really becoming more and more apparent to me, as senior trainers, it and that's my personal experience, is that it's more demanding. Do you feel that? Do you feel that the
yeah.
work is becoming more demanding?
Yeah, mostly not because people are more difficult, but more because people are more advanced. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
need to keep up with them, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like
I
what
ooh
used to sort of we used to be able to kind of, well, it doesn't really matter. But it's like today, it's like
yeah,
everything has to be. tightened up and
Well, I need to grow.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
need to keep
yeah,
growing like a mad person. I
yeah.
can't
You
stop
can't
for
just,
one
yeah,
second anymore because and honestly, I think the generation that is now growing up, they're going to surpass us.
yeah.
And I mean, I'm going to be learning from them like full on for sure. Like they are so far along this path already. They're so open and basically if connecting through the heart or connecting in harmony, we have become so disconnected that we need to come back into connection with each other again, right?
Totally, totally,
Yeah, and
totally.
so these people are so developed now. Like the 30 people who are in their 30s now, it's just amazing. Like the way they take their steps is just like giant leaps, and that's you're going running to keep up, you know. And I get to grow with them. And like it's a co-creation. Literally, I'm starting to understand what co-creation actually means. It's a co-creation. As they grow, we grow. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? I think it's lovely.
I'm so grateful to you, Nadia, for this interview and this talk with you, in which I've learned a lot. So thank you so much,
Thank you for your invitation.
and
Yeah.
and hope to see you soon.
Yes, let's.